Hey everybody, good bold morning. Welcome to Bold TV. I'm Carrie Sheffield here with Clay Aiken.
Good morning, Carrie.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. If you are watching us on Facebook or wherever you're watching us, make sure you like the Bold Facebook page. Make sure
Bold TV.
Bold TV. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, and you can download this as a podcast, available on SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcast listening pleasure. Thanks for joining us. Big week as always.
Yes, and also make sure to put your comments, your questions.
I was going to get that probably.
We'll get there eventually.
But yes, it's important. It's important that you make sure that you're including your comments and your questions, because we appreciate those. And a lot of times folks will ask a question or put in a comment that'll guide the discussion in a way that we hadn't necessarily planned on. It'll give Carrie a rabbit hole to run down.
Yes, or it'll add additional insight so that Clay can go on a beautiful soliloquy that I will correct him on.
Oh, I never do that. You never go down rabbit holes,
Never.
Right? So, we have plenty of different rabbit holes to go down today because it's been a pretty eventful week, and I would say just yesterday alone, obviously incredibly eventful for more reasons than I think most people would actually think.
So many things. Well, I mean, obviously, first, the big one was Comey's testimony on Capitol Hill on the Senate Intelligence Committee. So we will get to that. We're going to dedicate a lot more to that, including our rosy-colored glasses segment. But we also want to talk a little bit about the UK elections.
Which got completely forgotten, I think, yesterday, especially in the U.S. media, in the wake of all the drama that was Comey. But a huge deal in the U.K. And I am admittedly a junkie, and it's well documented that I'm a junkie when it comes to watching UK election returns. They do it very differently than we do. Fascinating to me, if you watch the news in the UK yesterday, all day long during the day for them, they don't really mention the elections that much. It's not until the polls close that they dive into it. I think, God, imagine if we did that like this in this country, where they don't just get bombarded with election stuff.
For 2 years.
Right. So they do it very differently, incredibly differently. And the biggest difference, I think, perhaps, was that this election was called as a snap election. So the Prime Minister, Theresa May, was able to call an election earlier than it was originally scheduled to be. Not something she had to do, but she did it because she believed she was ahead in the polls by multiple double digits, and she believed that she could, I guess, rally her more support to her side and strengthen her mandate in the UK Parliament as she went into these negotiations. And Carrie, what happened with that gamble?
Well, it appears that it was, first of all, today's Theresa May. If I talk to you in British for a little bit.
Not like that, you can't.
Honey, polling in the UK don't make no sense. Like Brexit, it showed that Brexit was going to lose. And you know what? Brexit won. So when your poll was set, that was my British accent.
Oh, well, it's not very good, is it?
Oh, how's yours?
It's quite good, actually.
Actually, you're upper class.
But anyway.
No, the thing is, she was cocky. Look, Theresa May ain't no Iron Lady. She is no Margaret Thatcher. Like, Margaret Thatcher would never have done this. Margaret Thatcher would have just gone and governed. Like, she had a policy mandate to implement her agenda. This is my take. Like, Theresa May won her position. She was the Prime Minister. And if she was
Did she win her position? No. Not true. No, she was given her position because David. And I think that's an argument for why.
A true leader takes the opportunity and she builds the coalition, she builds the mandate. That's what a true leader does. Right, well, and I feel like by calling this election, it was undermining the confidence in herself. I think it was a big mistake.
I wonder how you would have felt if she had gotten a big mandate. I mean, essentially, she's the leader of the Conservative Party. They're Republicans over there. Their version of the Republicans over there. So I
said this like 2-3 weeks ago.
Well, listen, I mean, the argument was that she has to go into this EU negotiation to extract England from the UK from the EU, and she was not elected. David Cameron had been elected the leader and resigned after the Brexit vote. She was appointed within the party, and I think she thought, first of all, she was ahead in polls by a huge margin. And you can say that polls are not accurate, but the truth is the ones in the UK have been accurate this time around. She was ahead substantially. She thought, hey, I'm ahead. Let me call this because it's my right to do so. Strengthen my position. Get enough of a mandate behind me that when I go into these EU negotiations, I can say, listen, the public is with me, et cetera, so she can have a stronger hand. And then a lot of things happened in the UK in the interim. They only have a 5-week election cycle, which is just the most delightful thing I've ever heard of in my life. They only have 5 weeks to campaign.
Don't leave us. I'm afraid you're going to go across the pond.
But in that period, she not only did you see 2 horrific attacks in the UK, the London Bridge attack and the attack in Manchester, which I think harmed her a little bit because there was some discussion after the London Bridge attack about the need for more police, and she had been, as Home Secretary, part of taking away funding for police officers. So I think that hurt her some. But also, her party put out a manifesto, which was roundly criticized because of a lot of the austerity cuts that she planned to put in place.
And yet the Wall Street Journal said they didn't like her because she said she wanted to increase taxes in some respects. So she was sort of a namby-pamby conservative.
She was weak. And she's a politician. And she was running against, and they don't do it the same way as we do, but she was running against essentially the UK's version of Bernie Sanders, right? Who a lot of people in his Labour Party had believed was completely unelectable and would not be able to get a majority because Bernie Sanders is a democratic socialist. Jeremy Corbyn is a straight-up socialist, unapologetic about it. He's rough around the edges, and I think they thought that he would not be able to bring support to the Labour Party. He proved them wrong. He does not have a majority, but he certainly gained, I think, 38 seats.
Yeah, well, and it gained enough to erode the Conservative governing majority, so they had to get a new coalition, and Theresa May doesn't have an outright claim to the prime ministership. So right now, she's reportedly with the Queen, kissing the hand of the Queen and asking to keep her job. So I think she'll get to keep her job. But I think that she misread her people. I think that she was never really a big proponent of Brexit. And yet she was the one who was supposed to understand the signal that was being sent by Brexit. So I think because Corbyn did so well, it was, like you said, the Bernie Sanders, which is the anti-establishment perspective. Right. So she never really channeled that anti-establishment ethos. And that was her problem, I think, because she never really took that mantle. She never took the baton of what Brexit meant. And that was a bad calculation.
Well, I mean, but that said, most of the colored constituencies instead of districts, but most of the constituencies that voted for leave ended up coming to her because the party that really had been in the driving force behind Brexit didn't put a lot of people up for election. They didn't have any, they kind of went away after they got what they wanted. So most of those leave areas went to Theresa May's Conservative Party. Her issue was that she lost a lot of the seats that she had in the center of the country that had been Remain. She lost a lot of those to the Labour Party. My question for you is, and what I've been fascinated about, because I literally stayed up till 1:30 watching all of these returns come in, and then I jumped right back on the TV this morning to watch it again. There was a backlash amongst voters in the UK to the Brexit election, to the Brexit vote. A lot more young people. Turnout was higher for this particular election than it has been in years. A lot more young people showed up to the polls to vote than had voted in the past. And a lot of people on BBC and Sky News and ITV and their news networks in the UK are talking about how it wasn't necessarily just a second Brexit referendum at all, admittedly, but a lot of the energy and enthusiasm was based on people who were upset with how Brexit went. What do Republicans need to take from that? If the Brexit vote was essentially the precursor to what pushed Donald Trump into power here in the U.S., what should Republicans in this country take, if anything, from watching the backlash in the UK dramatically erode the Conservative Party there?
Yeah, well, this leads into the next headline that is a lesson I think that the Republicans had, which was that the Republicans just passed last night also a Dodd-Frank replacement bill. And to me,
she doesn't have an answer to that.
I do have an answer because it's related. Okay. And that is that the way you do what Theresa May did not do is to focus on policy and to get an agenda that's substantive, and you get that moving, you get momentum. She just really muddled. She just was muddling. She didn't say, okay, I have been given this baton, I'm going to run with it. I'm going to put forward a substantive policy agenda. And Lord knows, you know how I feel about Donald Trump and all the distraction that we've had with, the issue with Comey, and we'll get more into that. But I think what Republicans can learn from this is that they have both the House, the Senate, they have the White House. They have a moment. And the question is, are they going to seize it? Which is what Theresa May did not do.
I always think it's so cute when you talk about Republican policy in this particular Congress, as if they're going to get anything done
this
whatsoever.
This Dodd-Frank replacement bill is a big deal. I mean, it substantively restructures community banking, it restructures the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
And it passed which House of Congress?
It passed the House,
okay,
yes.
But not expected to necessarily pass the Senate, if at all, at least not in the same format that it is in now. So
give it some time, and also
just like the healthcare replacement bill,
which is going to go. No, it's going to go for a vote before the July 4th election. That's what Mitch McConnell said. We'll see.
Okay, we'll see. But it's obviously there's a lot of distraction going on, and the big reason that a lot of the distraction's going on is because we got a lot of stuff going on with Trump and Russia and Comey. So let's move to. Do we have a graphic for this? Is that what your goal is?
No. Well, we're going to get one. We don't have
one today. For this segment.
Rose-colored glasses, and we're just going to. I don't think we have time. We've got to get the Congresswoman in soon. So let's just do one rosy-colored video.
You want to just rock, paper, scissors it and see who gets to do
Okay,
theirs?
Ready?
Yes. Okay, so you get to do yours, which is going to disappoint the staff because they wanted to do mine, but whatever. Okay, so we got
time. We'll do yours at the end.
Okay, sounds good. We have your video ready, Carrie?
Yep. Let's see my rosy-colored glasses video.
Oh, well, let's explain.
First of all, if Director Comey in any way thought that he was being intimidated or the president was trying to interfere with an investigation, I believe that Director Comey had an obligation to report it to the Justice Department, to tell those around him, because that could be considered a crime. And as director of the FBI, he had an obligation to make that known. As far as I know, he didn't. In fact, when the deputy director, Andy McCabe, was testifying last week, he said there's been no interference and no obstruction of the investigation whatsoever. Also, Director Comey comes before the House Intelligence Committee and the Senate Intelligence Committee. He had an obligation, I believe, to tell those committees because he was briefing us on the status of the investigation. And I'm not aware of Director Comey ever saying to anyone in the Congress, and I think Senator Burke concurred on this, about any interference in the investigation.
So our rose-colored glasses segment, really quickly, is an opportunity for us to take a look at one particular video that Carrie chooses or that I choose, and see how people on very different sides of the aisle can look at the same thing and see something completely different. So Carrie chose this video because she saw what Representative King said in a certain way. What was that?
I saw it as Trump's vindication because Comey is legally obligated, if he believes there is obstruction of justice, Comey is legally obligated to report this. He should have gone to the oversight committees in Congress. He should have gone to his superiors in DOJ. So basically, this clip, and Comey reaffirmed it in his testimony yesterday, showed that, and look, what Trump did was sketchy, undoubtedly sketchy. Is it illegal? No. And I think that there is definitely a difference there. Same thing with what Loretta Lynch did by, pressuring Comey to call something a matter instead of an investigation. Same thing, sketchy. Is it illegal? Well, we can argue that.
Right.
So,
well, first of all, we're going to do another segment. We're going to start another segment on this show where we have to respond to something without blaming the other side at some point, because somehow you're going to get that Loretta Lynch thing in, which is completely irrelevant.
It was mentioned yesterday in the testimony.
But you made my argument for me already, so I really don't need to respond. You can't say Comey has a legal responsibility to report obstruction of justice if 10 seconds later, you're going to say there was no obstruction of justice. You can't get mad at Comey for not reporting what he thought was obstruction of justice when yesterday he admitted that he was not in a position yet to determine if that was obstruction of justice. You can't have both. And I would imagine that Republicans would rather have Comey saying, I'm not sure if it's obstruction of justice yet. So you can't be mad at him because he didn't say anything. I think his response to that was that he needed time to determine whether or not that's what that was. There was nothing to report. He felt what his conversations with Trump were, I can't quote him, I don't know the word, but he thought they were suspect. He thought he was very uncomfortable. He didn't think they were appropriate, but he did not yet say that he believed that it rose to the specter of obstruction of justice, and he left that to Robert Mueller to determine. So I would say that you're really kind of barking up the wrong tree, anybody who's yelling at him for not saying something Because if you want to be mad at him for not reporting obstruction of justice, then you have to admit there was obstruction of justice. So if you want to do that, you want to get pissed at him for not doing that,
look,
then we can play that game.
in either
but that
scenario,
means you're admitting that Donald Trump obstructed justice.
No, Comey himself admitted in the testimony that he didn't have the cojones to say to the president, "You can't say that to me. That's inappropriate. This is a bright line, and you might be close."
There's times when you say things in here where I am so dumbfounded, I don't know how to say to you, "Holy crap, Carrie, you're completely insane." But you know what?
Sometimes you get shocked. Have I ever said anything illegal, Clay?
No, but
if I did, I hope that you would stop me immediately.
Great, then I appreciate that. You are now just right there admitting that what Donald Trump did was illegal.
No,
so
I am
then,
not.
Then
I don't even know
what does
what
it
you're
matter?
talking about.
Again, I say that, you guys, but Republicans are talking out of both sides of their mouth. If what he did was illegal, then yes, Comey had a responsibility to say something. But if what he did was not illegal, then no, Comey didn't have a responsibility to say anything until he determined it was illegal.
Exactly.
So which one was it?
Exactly.
So no,
you confirmed my point.
No, but then which one was it? Well,
look,
no, hold on.
Clay,
No, we got to go to the guest. We got to go to the guest.
We have to go to the guest. We'll come back to this.
Okay, we're going to come back to this.
We'll come back to this.
You guys put it in the comments
put it in the notes.
To come back to this.
Yes.
Okay.
And Mickey agrees with you. Mickey Alessi says Comey could not conclude at the time there was a definite obstruction, but he certainly suspected, and thus the memos.
Okay, we'll come back because I'm bad about not wrapping things up.
Yes. So we have a member of the House Oversight Committee with us, and we respected her time, so we very much appreciate that she's here. She's here on Skype. She's the delegate, Stacey Plaskett, who's representing the U.S. Virgin Islands. Welcome, Stacey.
Good morning. Good morning to you guys. I've been really listening attentively to what you've been saying. It's been fantastic, the argument back and forth.
Oh gosh, it gets heated in here.
Spirited debate.
Congresswoman.
Spirited, yes.
I mean, you serve on the House Oversight Committee, so you've certainly been a voting member of that committee. You've certainly been very involved in the discussion surrounding this situation. Your take, if you've been listening, your take on what we've been talking about and how that testimony played yesterday.
Well, you know, my esteemed colleague, Peter King, often operates in not just alternative facts, but an alternative dimension as well. And when he says that he had a legal obligation, I'm not sure where he found that legal obligation under the law. James Comey felt that something was wrong, wrote a memorandum about it, and he did, in fact, talk with individuals. He spoke with the leadership of the FBI, put it together as part of the investigation that was an ongoing matter. So it's not as if he didn't do anything about it, and it's not as if he didn't include it in the investigation that they were conducting because he was suspicious, because he felt that something was wrong about it, and that he was going to continue to observe and watch. I mean, when I have been a prosecutor at the local level, I worked at the Justice Department, and because you believe that someone did something wrong, that day you don't issue an arrest warrant for them or an indictment. You gather as much facts as you can before you then move forward on it. And the FBI, along with the Justice Department, will indict no crime before it's time. So this is a matter that's just continuing to be investigated, and that's exactly what the team is doing.
Well, Congresswoman, and certainly Democrats, including Nancy Pelosi this morning on Morning Joe, said that there's not enough evidence to say that this was a crime or obstruction of justice, and that it is up to the Mueller hearing and the Mueller investigation. I think that Republicans would agree with that as well. I guess my question for you, though, is when you heard Comey talking about leaking this memo, and this was the president's defense, where he said basically that leak is illegal potentially, and Comey himself could be prosecuted. Are you okay with Comey's methodology here?
And do you call it and would you consider it a leak? I think that's important.
I don't know if it was a leak, because a leak is something that's classified documents. When we talk about the things that are illegal, what has been illegal is leaking classified information. If you listen to the hearing that went on, he specifically wrote a document, those memos that he wrote, he specifically made them unclassified information, which means that they're subject to FOIA, which means that they can become public documents if requested. So letting out information that is unclassified and will eventually become public does not in no way mean that it was illegal to give it to another individual or to let it be put into the general media.
And he did say in his testimony that he specifically, in most instances, I think he did say that not with every memo he wrote, but that in most instances he did take great care to try to make sure these were written in a way where they would not become classified. Is that right?
Exactly. That's what he said in his testimony. And listen, I have worked for James Comey, and he is not going to put himself in a situation where he is doing something that is illegal. You can be assured of that.
So,
he's not going to purposely and work through a scenario in which what he does will then be at some point construed as illegal.
So you also worked at the Justice Department. You worked with James Comey. You also worked at the Justice Department at the same time as Christopher Wray, who is the president's new nominee for FBI director. Do you have any insights on Christopher Wray?
Well, Chris is, considered by many to be one of those very straight shooters, just like we've seen with James Comey, Robert Mueller, Christopher Wray. When I worked at the Justice Department, Chris was at some point the chief of staff. When I worked on Larry Thompson's staff as one of the staff counsels, he's the guy who likes to stay in the background, put his head down, do the work. Just an interesting fact about him, he's an enormous intellect, but he was also on the varsity crew team of his university. So he's a really intense kind of person, part of a team player and willing to pull his oar.
So you think he'll have no trouble sailing through the nomination process then?
I can't see how that would be the case. He is someone who's worked, he's a Republican by everybody's standards, but someone who is always very fair, very measured in what he does, and he would have my support.
Did going forward, assuming Christopher Wray is the new FBI director with Robert Mueller's investigation, what's next for that investigation? And did the testimony yesterday actually change anything or bring about any sort of bombshell that's going to have any real effect?
I don't think in the public hearing that there was anything that was said that it may have been confirmation for some people, reiteration of what had already been given out in the public, what everyone knew. I think what's really important, what's going on in those closed sessions, the ones that are classified that the public is not aware of. I know that the House Intelligence Committee as well as the Senate Committee are moving full steam ahead. They are really engaged in this process, along with the special investigation that Robert Mueller is working on, which is running in tandem with them, but is a separate and apart from the ones that are going on here in Congress.
And Congresswoman, I know that as a member of the Government Oversight Committee, there is a word that there is going to be a new chairman, Trey Gowdy. What's your assessment of him and his ability to handle the oversight of the Trump administration?
Well, listen, I have a great deal of respect for Trey Gowdy as a prosecutor, a former prosecutor. He and I do not often see eye to eye, but we are good friends. And I think he is going to do what he thinks is best for that committee, and I think he will listen to the other side. I think that Elijah Cummings, as continuing as the ranking member, will be a great balance for him. The two of them work together on, on the Benghazi committee, and we'll see how that works out.
So I want to change gears for just a second, because who would have thought that there's other news in the world that besides Donald Trump and James Comey? As the delegate from the Virgin Islands, you are in a similar, not the same position, but a similar position to the delegate from Puerto Rico. And there's been quite a bit of news recently, very varied news about Puerto Rico's crisis, their debt crisis, their Medicaid, crisis, and how much of support should come from the rest of the United States with regard to the Trump administration considers it a bailout. Democrats consider it very necessary support. How do you feel about the U.S.'s role in supporting and helping, and if the word is correct, bailing out Puerto Rico, given that the Virgin Islands are not in a similar crisis, but certainly in a similar position as a territory?
Sure. The Virgin Islands are in a financial crisis right now. We have, been trying to work through it on our own without the support of Congress. But listen, let's just take a step back and do some history. Until the territories of the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Northern Marianas, American Samoa, Guam were territories, it was always construed by the Constitution that an area that the United States brought in as a territory would eventually become a state. This then stopped after the purchase of these other places. Many would say it was because these individuals, the individuals that resided there, were majority minority populations. And in the Constitution, it says that territories are supposed to be administered and taken care of by Congress. Congress has the responsibility for the territories. This is the first time that we've seen that Congress has neglected that responsibility. They have treated the territories infinitely like second-class individuals or second-class citizens. We do not have the right to vote for president. When you reside in the territories, all of the delegates of the territories do not have a vote on the floor, although we do all of the other work that members of Congress do in terms of introducing legislations, being involved in hearings and committees, etc., like the District of Columbia. And when it says that it's a bailout, listen, you have to remember that in the last bill that was passed for Puerto Rico received not one dime from the federal government. This was merely a mechanism to allow Puerto Rico additional time to work out their debt so that Wall Street could be paid back. The only reason that Congress became involved in Puerto Rico's debt crisis was because Wall Streets were the ones that were knocking on the door of the majority, knocking on the door of Congress and saying that if you don't step in, we're not going to get paid.
Well, that's because under their legal bond obligation. So I was a former bond analyst for Moody's. I mean, it's an airtight promise that you have to pay back your bond debt. So, you know, it's keeping a promise is really what it is. But
here's the problem.
Can you talk a little bit about?
I am going to talk about. So here's the problem with the bond debt that Puerto Rico and the other territories have. I'll give you a real life example. All of the territories receive from the federal government. So everybody in the United States, all of the states receive money from the federal government. Some of us receive more than others. Most states receive between 25 to up to 40% of their general fund comes from federal subsidies, from federal support. All of the territories receive on average about 14% of our money from the federal government. We're getting shortchanged in a lot of ways just because we're a territory. They change formulas, they make arbitrary caps on what we receive, unlike they do in the states, because we don't have people on the vote that are voting on the floor. We don't have the power of the vote to insist that we be taken care of.
Sure.
And how this then affects the bond market is that, say you're a parent, you have a child that's sick, and you have to take that child to the hospital. You do not have the money in the bank account, but you've got a credit card. Are you going to let your kid die? No, you're going to use that credit card so that they get the treatment that they need. That's what Puerto Rico has been doing for an extended period of time. They have not been getting the money. They have not had the support from the federal government. And so they've used the bond market like a credit card to take care of the structures and the social mechanisms that the other states have had.
Congresswoman, can I ask you, like moving beyond then just the political narrative, like what's happening on the ground in the Virgin Islands to promote economic growth? What can we do and what's happening sort of there on the ground to prevent, you know, we can debate about sort of the general fund contribution, but what about kind of domestically and homegrown, what's happening in the Virgin Islands and how can U.S. consumers support that?
And I didn't think I was being engaging in political banter. I think I was just trying to give you the facts, because you had brought up the bond market and the fact that Puerto Rico was in debt and they had an obligation to pay off the bonds. And I was trying to explain to you why they had the large amount of bonds that they do. The Virgin Islands has tried to have a diversified economy for an extended period of time, like Puerto Rico. We have a vibrant rum distillery, Crucian rum, as well as Captain Morgan, Diageo, and Beam have their distilleries there. Up until 2012, we had the second largest oil refinery in the Western Hemisphere on the island of St. Croix. Hess and the Venezuelan government had an oil refinery there. That closed in 2012, which really brought a tremendous downturn in our economy.
And did that close down because of a drop in oil prices, or what caused the downturn?
It was a confluence of issues, right? So the oil that they were refining was a very crude oil that took a lot more refining. Hess decided that it wanted to get out of the refining business, the price of oil as well. But before that, We had, a really strong middle class that was not part of the government sector, as well as all of the, the trickle-down effect of having an industry like that. At different points, we've had pharmaceuticals like Puerto Rico. We've had Alcoa oil refining, as well as really trying to create a knowledge base. We have a tax incentive program that brought private equity, investment bankers, and others to the territory. And individuals like myself and other Virgin Islanders were able to come back home because we provided support to a lot of those knowledge-based businesses. In 2004, Congress changed the rules with regard to that, and so that business was lost as well. And so we don't want to rely just on tourism, because tourism really goes with the vagaries of people's disposable income, which we saw during the Great Recession, and we lost a lot of the tourism industry.
Right. I think Las Vegas is dealing with similar things as well, and other Hawaii.
The other thing we have to deal with is that, we're competing with other Caribbean islands that do not have to do things like EPA restrictions, Army Corps of Engineers, when they try and change their the mix of what they're offering in terms of tourism. And that permitting process and others have really slowed down the growth of our tourism product as well.
You know what?
So
No, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I like her, and I want you to come back if you don't mind.
We
because
want to help the Virgin Islands.
I'm sitting here quietly, and I want to help you against Carrie here, because that's my job. But I don't know enough about.
Good Southern gentleman.
There you go. But I don't know enough about the role of territories. So I'd love to have you back to talk about the role of territories within the.
We're a fantastic place, and Carrie and Clay, everybody on Bold TV, you guys need to come down and do a show in the Virgin Islands.
Listen,
we'll have as a backdrop.
We're sold. We're sold.
That's all.
Bold is
That's all we
sold.
need. We'll be there. Thank you so much, Congresswoman, for joining us today. Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett from the Virgin Islands.
Thanks so much.
I do like her. We need to.
She's
have her back.
lovely.
Yes,
Yes.
she's on it, and she stuck it to you, which is what I like the most.
Hey, we had a friendly debate.
We did,
Yes.
but I'm always in support of someone who sticks it to Carrie.
Because you need help. Yes.
There's I won't consider that a rabbit hole because it was fascinating to me, and it was certainly off of our Comey topic, which we needed a little bit of respite from. But Comey is the topic of the week, I would say. I think the Trump campaign's relationship or no relationship with Russia, and that whole administration's that whole mess.
Well, and also we're
to
going to have to bring her back because she is on the House Oversight Committee, and they're going to have a lot to say and a lot involved in terms of making sure that we get to the bottom of what was happening. And Clay, I got to say, even if let's say the scenario happens that Trump somehow is removed, unlikely, remote, I'm still winning because I like Mike Pence too. Mike Pence, I'm a big fan. Mike Pence's nephew has come to our Bold birthday party. I'm a big fan. So you know what?
I'm sorry.
I'm winning, and I won't even get sick of winning, but. Yes.
Let's bring
is that what you want, Clay?
Let's bring in our guests so you'll stop dropping names a little bit.
No,
Let's drop some other names. Psychologist Chloe Carmichael is back with us, and so is Russia columnist whose name I always mispronounce, Maria Snegovaya.
Hello.
Did I do okay though?
Perfectly.
Did I do it perfectly?
You did it
Look at
perfectly.
me.
And I have to
might as well be
give
Russian.
congratulations to Maria because she just got her green card.
Thank
So,
you.
Oh yes.
Yes.
Lots of stuff going on in the news right now. Obviously, with regard to Russia, let's just start with a blanket question. How you saw yesterday's testimony, and if you believe it will have any effect at all, Chloe.
Sure. Well, thanks again for having me back. It's great to be here with you. I really admired, first of all, Comey for going on and I think really trying to offer as accurate a recollection as he possibly could. So I think that was actually great. And he confirmed things that people on both sides of the aisle had doubted. So my hope is that it might actually unify us.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? Wouldn't that be great?
Well, and I think also the committee was run very professionally too. I thought both the
Mad
Democrats
props.
and the Republicans had
Mad props to
good
North
questions.
Carolina
The fact
Senator
that there
Burr.
was a hearing, I think, is great. The fact that he was brought into a public place where he could air out whatever it was that he had to say, I think speaks really well of our country.
Maria?
From a Russian perspective, it's really remarkable to see the ex-head of the security service to be so openly critical of the current head of the government, given that in Russia, the head of security is actually head of the state altogether. So for us, it's a little unusual, and of course, it's definitely a manifestation of the strength of the U.S. democracy. On the more substantive matters, I do not think we've seen any smoking gun, and that was the case. It's essentially, if you talk to people in D.C., this is basically what they will tell you. There's a lot of smoke, but there is no substantive evidence yet, or we don't know for how long. So in this sense, it has been just a continuation of the same. I do not, unfortunately, think this is going to bring Democrats and Republicans together. I think that polarization is increasing. And how do you see that? You see that from the polls, remarkably, regarding how the Republicans and Democrats perceive Russia. It's interesting, but the Republicans actually keep improving their attitudes towards Russia over the recent polls. It's right now up to 30 and 40% of the Republican Americans who actually suggest that there is possibility of establish friendly relationship with Russia despite everything that's going on, unlike the Dems.
Is that a tribal reaction, though, do you think? Do you think that's a tribal reaction of Republicans who want to support Donald Trump and therefore want to believe or say, at least, that there is not an issue with Russia, that we shouldn't or don't have an issue with Russia?
Certainly, partisanship play a big role in all that story, and it's been like that before. We also know that during the electoral period as well. But I do believe there's also a role for the media to play. In this sense, I think you guys are doing a great job in trying to provide this mixed coverage. But essentially, if you watch Fox News, you will perceive really different reality, and that's no news from when you read the New York Times.
I want to show a poll that we have from our readers, because we polled our readers on Twitter, or our viewers. What do you guys think about what happened with Comey? And Chloe, I don't think that the consensus among our viewers is that they would make that much of a difference. So 78 to 22%, most people said it did not change their opinion of the Russia investigation. I think it almost became and Chloe, you're a psychologist, was the testimony sort of almost like an ink blot where people see what they want, kind of like what Clay and I do with our rosy-colored glasses? Do people see what and project what they want to hear from Comey?
I think that people do that in general. There's something called a confirmation bias in psychology, which is that once we have our minds made up about a person or an issue, we tend to see everything through a lens of confirming what it is that we already believed.
Right. Well, there would certainly be. I think it's important to note that usually our viewers tend to skew left, and at least in the way they see things. We've certainly got a great, strong base of viewers who skew to the right, but our polls tend to skew left. To me, I would argue that if you want to look at that question through the lens of did this change your opinion about the Russia investigation, in the sense that Trump's in so much more trouble, then that's actually a good thing, I think, for the Trump administration, to see that people said no, it didn't change their opinion, because I think a lot of Democrats went into it, at least people who had that confirmation bias of he's bad, he's done something wrong, looking for Comey to say something that would absolutely, and I've had some rose-colored glasses segments of my own in the last 24 hours with friends who listened to him say lines like, and mine, by the way, had we gotten to it, was listening to Comey say things like he absolutely didn't. He didn't say that he didn't direct me to stop the investigation, but it was very clear to me that he was. A lot of Democrats saw that as, that's our smoking gun. But it wasn't to me. What is a smoking gun? I mean, what if Democrats want to find something? What do they need to find? What is it that is going to do it?
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of the debate during the discussion was about what exactly Trump said to Comey, right? He said, I'm hoping you maybe drop the investigation against Flynn. That is not enough for the obstruction of justice, apparently, based on the yesterday's conclusion. That's how it held. The real proof or the real problem would be for Trump, if the FBI was to discover, for example, some kind of evidence of collusion with the Russians. We don't know that yet either. We know that Roger Stone communicated with the Goods Affair, the Russia link hacker, but we don't know exactly what they discussed and how that proceeded. So something more substantive that would be allow the investigation to really make that claim. But so far, we just don't have it.
Well, and Trump certainly feels vindicated. We got his tweet as well, talking, he just tweeted out this morning. Let's throw that up on screen. Just Trump's Trump's rosy-colored glasses listening to the Comey hearing. He said, despite so many false statements and lies, total and complete vindication. And wow, Comey is a leaker.
Which is funny to me because he seems to focus on, no, he didn't. There weren't any lies. I mean, Comey came out and he told the truth. Nothing really changed from his testimony. Comey, I don't believe at any point ever said, no, I didn't tell the president that he was not under investigation. I found it fascinating that when Trump's attorney came out with his statement right after, the word currently was always included. Trump was currently not under investigation at the time. No one's ever said he's not under investigation now. I mean, we don't know. I want to ask you, Chloe, though, as you watched it, do you think Comey had an axe to grind? Did it seem to you as if though he was a little bitter?
Well, he was certainly, by his own self-report, confused, surprised, upset, dismayed, and defensive by the things that were said, specifically about how the FBI was in a state of disarray, and that was one of the things that he said was a lie. I think that that's a tough one, though, because, of course, he's injured. And I really admired him, though, because even though he was coming from a place of personal embarrassment, he was doing the best that he could, I think, to relay the facts. And so even though I don't necessarily mean that hearing brought us any great clarity about the Russian investigation, I do think that it brought up several things that we as a nation could hopefully come together and agree upon, or at least have a respectful dialogue. As a psychologist, I get people in my office on both sides of the aisle all the time saying, can you believe those people? Can you believe those people? And so I just really thought, as Carrie mentioned, and was also mentioned, that to have a model where we had a respectful, knowledgeable inquiry, even though, as you pointed out as well, we all can look at the same set of facts and draw very different conclusions. I just admired the fact that it was respectful and knowledgeable dialogue.
Let's pull in a few comments.
I want to ask Maria's face changed. Maria's face changed when I asked that question, though, so I want to get your take on whether or not you thought he had an axe to grind, or you thought he was bitter, or you thought there was some sort of personal bias there.
I just think you can't win being Comey at this point. He argued, he created the whole problem with the Democrats when he, communicated that information regarding the Hillary investigation. Now he has Trump situation, plus he has this leak situation again. I mean, I don't envy the guy.
Anybody who's hated by both sides is probably doing okay
right.
in this world,
True.
right?
Well, Joanne Lopez says tapes ought to do it.
They don't exist, Joanne.
Lordy, can you say the phrase actually?
Lordy, I hope they're tapes. That's what he said. Yeah.
We were waiting for Clay to say that.
I don't think tapes exist. I think if they existed, someone. I mean, listen, the Trump White House has been like a sieve at this point. They leak everything. So if there were tapes in existence, I think someone would have at least confirmed the existence of them by now. I don't think they're tapes. I think it was Donald Trump just running off at the mouth like he's so talented at doing.
Well, and I'm curious, Chloe, from a psychologist standpoint, when you saw Comey doing the testimony, did he come across as defensive?
Well, actually, I think that he has a really wonderful ability that even though he was upset, I believe that he was trying as hard as he could to put all of that aside and to just share the facts as he recalled them.
Do you think, I mean, I agree with you. I was impressed, and I think everyone on the committee was impressed. He had nothing but respect, even the most difficult. Even Jim Risch from Idaho, I think, was one of his most pointed questioners, maybe Langford from Oklahoma. Even they admitted and said to him that they had a great deal of respect for him. Do you think that the way he presented himself, the way he, at least in my view, went to great lengths to be incredibly honest? He asked if he ever called the president himself. He said no. Oh wait, actually I was asked to call the switchboard at one point, but so I did physically dial it. Do you think that type of aggressive honesty, if you want to call it that, will help his view of people?
Of course, I think it's great. The one place that I did see his emotionality, in my opinion, get a little bit of the better of him, although I agree that for the most part he went to great lengths to be meticulously honest. Even when he was having trouble recalling a detail, he would be transparent about that, which was great. The one space, though, where I did see him slide into emotionality was saying that it was absolute lies when it was suggested that there was a disarray going on at the FBI, because as we all said earlier, he has been widely criticized and widely praised by both sides, oftentimes within the same 24-hour period. So for anyone to say that it would be a totally irrational idea for someone to suggest that there was some disarray going on, for him to label that an absolute lie, was the one time I saw him let emotionality take him away from fact.
Defensive of his people at the FBI, like.
Yeah, well, I think also he was very passionate when he was talking about Russia, and he said there's no fuzz about it, that the Russians did hack the election. And I know, Maria, you have an article, you've written a column. We can put the headline on screen because you're a columnist, looking at, do we have that headline?
Well, tell us about it, Carrie.
Well, anyway, so Maria, you say that Russian hacking may have helped Trump win, but Russians don't really care. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's very interesting how the Russians perceive the whole situation with the hackers and Trump story. The majority of the people, and again, that's largely based on how the Russian state-owned TV channels cover the situation, they just don't buy it. You know, they can't even believe that Russia can be so mighty and powerful. It's kind of, for some bizarre reason, they don't take pride in it. And the majority of them say, yeah, there should have been something ongoing within the U.S., and maybe the Democrats are so upset about the whole story, that they are blaming the Republicans for being helped by the Russians, but in fact, we have nothing to do with that. And until recently, the whole thing was actually not on the radars of the Russian people, especially given that there are so many problems within the country. Also, the Russian state has been trying its best to create a positive image of Trump. So again, Trump may as well be one of the most popular U.S. presidents in the Russian history. You know, at least the most popular U.S. president among all of the European countries. Right now, Trump is the most popular.
Well, actually, Maria, that's a great.
Frightening to me. To be honest with you.
That's a great segue into domestic polling. We have a couple polls we can show up about how people view here in America how Trump has been handling this. Can we throw those up, please? Let's throw these polls up. So this is from the Washington Post saying, do you think that Trump is cooperating with the investigations of Russian influence, or is he trying to interfere with the investigations? So you can see overall 56 people say that he is trying to interfere. And 17% of Republicans say he's trying to interfere, 58% of independents, 87% of Democrats. So
which reminds me how we live in such bubbles, because I'll admit, I think 56% is a low number based on my experience with people around me, and I would imagine you think it's a high number because Republicans seem to 17%. That's not very high. You know,
well, I have a lot of liberal friends, so
that's a good thing.
I'm glad you're.
If only we could
it's
fix
good
you. If only we could fix you. But to your point about the media, it's fascinating, and I encourage people, if you get a chance, to go on. I don't know the website. I watch a different way. To go on RT. Russia Today, not the American version, although that's substantially biased as well, but RT is the Russian state-owned media channel, and you can watch it online here in the U.S. It's just one of the most fascinating things to see them report on this leaking story, because they act incredulous, like you were saying, like, what are they talking about? And these are the anchors. They sit there and they say, what are they talking about? How could they do it? And that's incredibly effective amongst the Russian population. I would certainly imagine, if that's all you're getting.
Yeah, exactly. So Russians are actually quite optimistic about the possibility of the reestablishing the relationship with the United States in the future, and that largely has to do with the fact that the Putin administration views Trump very positively until now.
How did the interview that Vladimir Putin did with Megyn Kelly this past weekend, how did that play in Russia?
Oh, they thought he made some good jokes, but in general, but in general, of course, it's been really, really disrespectful to him the way she behaved, she acted. So nobody really thought that Putin won that game. I think she did a great job, actually, as a journalist.
Interesting.
I like that. Well, we're going to get I'm going to drop another name. Megyn Kelly's husband, we're going to get on the show next week. Awesome. He has a new book out, so we'll get him from Bookstr.
Well, we'll bring you two back when we go to the Virgin Islands. How about that? Because I have a feeling we'll still be talking about this Russia-Trump thing for quite a while. Maria and Chloe, thank you very much. Chloe Carmichael,
Thanks.
Maria Snegovaya.
Thank you.
For joining us.
Let's put a couple comments. Mickey Alessi says, it's not that Russia is powerful, it's that Putin and his underlings follow his directive.
Well, it's also, I think Maria made the point that when you are, I believe that anyone who watches one particular news network, I've always said, if you watch Fox, you're going to think one thing's true. If you watch MSNBC, you're going to think another thing's true. you really, I think there are a lot of networks that kind of try to show both sides, not as well as we do, but they do both sides. But if you watch Russia Today, and I do, and I really think you should try to just check it out once or twice, just because I imagine
I've
if you
been
watch,
on their programming.
not Russia Today, not Russia America. I'm talking
Okay,
about
that
RT,
one's super liberal.
If you watch that and that's your only source of information. I talk to young people in Russia. I actually talked to a friend of mine yesterday who is from Russia, and they love Vladimir Putin. He said, quote to me, "I'm glad I'm living in his time." And I think to myself, if that's all you get, if that's the only information you get is from that media organization, it's not possible for you to be.
Well, but I also think that the U.S. did not do enough after the collapse of the Soviet Union to help them rebuild their economy from the command and control Soviet-style government. And so for them, he represents a return to that old glory. So they don't know any different.
That's
all they
strength.
know is
Trump does for a
the
lot of people,
decline that happened in the 90s. So to them, that's sort of
he's their
hope.
Trump, except for he's never going to leave. And please, Lord, let Trump.
Yeah.
Leave. So
Well,
let's
but
move on to non-Trump stuff.
I respected that Chloe was very positive about the testimony, and Kathleen Klein says, yes, maybe there's hope for bipartisan action on what that means for the U.S.
Well, let's hope so, Kathleen. Let's
Thanks, Kathleen.
really,
Yes.
really hope so. Let's do a lighter note to our Bookstr segment. Sarah's back with us this
Yep.
week. We missed you last week.
Well, we've got a video here to introduce our excellent guest.
Oh, let's watch that.
Yeah, let's roll that. His name's Charles Kim. He's with the MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art.
My name is Charlotte. I am a filmmaker. I like black and white, especially old black and white movies. My classmates and everybody else prefer color. Sometimes that bums me out. But one day I met someone a lot like me at MoMA. And I learned that being true to myself is the best way to be.
Charles Kim is an associate publisher for the Museum of Modern Art, and he helped launch a line of children's books at MoMA, one of which is inspired by his daughter, Charlotte. So thank you for joining us, Charles. Tell us about how your daughter inspired this book and the series in general.
Good morning, and thanks for having me on. I've been at MoMA for 5 years, and I wanted to start a children's book line as soon as I got there, because when my daughter, who's now 11, when she was 4 or 5 years old, we were looking for good art books for children, and we weren't really finding good books that provided a unique museum perspective. And so I thought, you know what, why don't we try to make some ourselves? And so we have a really good team at MoMA that works on the exhibition catalogs, that works on the collection books as well, but we're also working on children's books. It's a collaboration between the Department of Education, publications, retail, curatorial.
What do you mean by museum perspective? Tell me what makes these books different because they are published by a museum.
A lot of children's books on art tend not to have actual reproductions of artworks in them. So you'll have a book on Matisse, and there will not be a single artwork by Matisse in the entire book.
That seems
Wow.
counterproductive to me.
It is counterproductive. Yeah, it's counterintuitive.
very
It really
bland.
is. And I think a lot of publishers feel that it's hard to clear the rights and permissions, and
since MoMA already has them.
well, it's not that we have them. We
True.
know how to clear them.
know how
We have the relationships with the artists and the estates. We have the high-res photography. We have the relationships with other museums, because it's not just MoMA works that are in our books. We have artworks from the Centre Pompidou in Paris and from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And we also bring a curatorial perspective. So we have a world-class education department, and we have our own finely tuned ideas about visual literacy and arts education, and curators who are working on exhibitions and who are specialists on various art and artists, and they want to extend that message to kids and families.
Tell me, you're talking to an artist, so I've got an answer
Okay.
already for this, but I want to
Great.
know yours. Why is it important for kids to see the real art in a book? You know, why does that matter?
Kids, at least the kids that we're trying to reach, and our books tend to skew for kids 4 to 8 years old. At that age, kids are really into the idea of doing things for themselves. And so when you show them artwork, when you explain to them how art is made, when you explain to them what artists do with the materials that they work with, they internalize that and they say, if they can do it, I can do it. And that's the message that we want to communicate.
And I love that video because you had Charlotte, deciding that she wanted to do art, and it was the art that she saw. It was what she was envisioning. And I love it, especially with Wonder Woman and the fact that we just had the highest grossing film made by a woman ever.
Yes, which is
so
fantastic.
Inspiring
Yes.
young girls to go into filmmaking. But how do you decide the themes of the books?
We have a kids' book editorial committee, and we have proposals, whether they come from inside the museum or from outside the museum. And we look at the list holistically. We want to have the bold-faced names, Matisse and Magritte and Degas, but we also want to do books on diverse topics and on diverse art and artists. So we want to do women artists. We just put out a new book, Sonia Delaunay, A Life of Color, and she is a really famous artist in her own right who was sort of overshadowed by her by her painter husband Robert. And it's not because she was a lesser artist. It's just because of the prejudices that existed at the time in early 20th century Paris.
Sarah, you bring us a variety of things. This is different. This is a children's book series. It's an art series. You know, tell me about why Bookstr is excited about this.
I just think it's really fun and exciting that that they're doing this. I think MoMA really is leading the way for a lot of museums out there, and so I think that if they get into publishing, just how you guys have for children, it's like, okay, now we can start spreading, those success stories of the artist, and I don't know, I just think, I'm happy about what they're doing there, and I think that for the kids out there, instead of playing on cell phones or, doing that kind of stuff. Like if moms could just show them, these are visual. And so it's like, okay, you might not be able to give your kid a book if they're ADHD or even if they're just a child at this point. But you might be able to give them this book because it's so graphically oriented.
How accessible are these? Not just literally accessible. I'm assuming you can get them online and anywhere. You don't have to be at MoMA.
That's
right.
But
how accessible are these books for kids who don't live in an area where any art is at all? If you live in Olathe, Kansas, and you're not really ever going to get to a major art museum.
Kansas City Art Museum is pretty awesome.
It's true. The Nelson Atkins is a world-class museum.
Lord,
absolutely.
You all understood what the hell I was saying.
Yes, no, it's true.
No, the thing is, I know Olathe, Kansas. I can't, sorry.
Shut
I
up.
have a mental fact checker. Sorry, pick a different town.
Really just
I know exactly.
Colby, Kansas.
Yeah.
He knows what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about. Yes.
God, I'm going to get up and leave. How accessible are these books to those kids who really have never seen art before? Because if you're coming from MoMA, you're talking about some really high-level, like official art stuff.
Yes, yes, that's true. Our education department focuses not on trying to get a wide audience to understand the great artists. They want to get children and families and adults to understand just what the concept of art making or design thinking is. So they have workshops on things like color or form or line or faces or people. And visual literacy, what I mean by visual literacy is that we want to teach children to pause and to actually look at something and ask themselves questions about what they're looking at.
And Charles, well, first of all, I love your French accent, so if you want to talk more in French, please, by all means, do so.
Okay.
But
That's something else I don't understand.
Anyway, Pam Little says, great name, Charlotte, also. So beautiful name of your daughter.
Oh,
we
thank
pull in
you.
our viewer comments. But I guess my question for you is, are you looking to go, scale this up? Are you looking to put this in every school? What's your growth, or what's your aspiration for the book line?
We publish 25 to 30 books a year at MoMA, and we publish all kinds of books, big art books, big collection books, scholarly titles. Children's books are a very small part of what we do, and so we don't necessarily have the bandwidth to go larger. We do have foreign language partners in 8 or 9 territories now around the world, in Spain and elsewhere, in Japan and China and Korea. And we could partner with larger publishers who can help us get into the schools better. But what we're trying to do is at least inspire others to make more art books specifically about art and about artists and about art making, so that we can teach visual literacy and we can spread the idea that kids are creative and they can make things.
Well, when it comes to spreading the word on books, there's no place better to do it than Bookstr.
It's true.
You guys all know, if you're watching now, you know how to find these books from MoMA. You can do so on Bookstr, and you can do so pretty much anywhere books are sold.
Yes, that's right. Amazon, momastore.org.
So check it out. I'll also say that the Bold audience is very actively involved in they're very interested in everything that Sarah brings to us. So we're hopeful you guys are interested in these, and you'll check them out on Bookstr. And we appreciate you very much, Charles, Kim, for being here. Sarah, you want to
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say they're really sweet books too. So if I would highly recommend them.
Great gifts.
Do I have 15 seconds to tell you how this book came about?
Please, please.
So when my daughter was 3 years old, I would take naps and I would snore, or I would drool, or I would have my eyes half open or whatever, and she would take pictures and video of me while I was doing this, and I would wake up and she would be in the corner and she would be giggling this evil laugh, just kind of scrolling through the photos and watching the video. And that's where Frank Viva and I got the idea to do a book about a filmmaker named Charlotte.
Oh, that's adorable. Well, we expect to see videos of that on Bookstr or here on Bold somewhere.
We'll put those up on screen.
Absolutely not.
We want your daughter's videos.
Absolutely
Thank you,
not.
Charles, Kim.
Thanks
you,
so
Sarah
much.
Hill,
Thank you, guys.
for joining us again. We'll see you next week, Sarah.
Yes, you will.
And we will see
You all.
next week.
Yep.
Tuesday at 9
see
for
what's
Bold
happening.
Business, and Friday at 10.
10.
We'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.